So my name is Ryan Bagnullo. I'm with SOA Software. I'm a solution architect focused on integration and security. And with me today is Max Katz from API. Max, if you could just say a few words.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Ryan. My name is Max Katz. I head developer relations for API.io, and I think it's going to be a pretty fun session. We're going to show you a real app and some APIs, so I think it's going to be fun.
Thanks, Max. So the problem that we're solving here today is time to market and complexity. And I've talked to a number of developers, and I myself being one, have, I think, spent in the past too much time with getting ready to build something as opposed to just building something. I think we all know what I'm talking about when I say, oh, I don't have my development studio yet, I've got to download my IDE, I don't have the right libraries, I'm not sure what the API is, I've got to read the documentation, and there's all sorts of time being spent to get ready to build something. And what we're talking about today is a faster time to market and a focus on simplicity to take things that are pretty complicated and to make them digestible and intuitive. Security is very difficult to get right, and it's also, in many cases, very difficult to understand. And we're also going to show the process to simplify that challenge to do security properly as opposed to driving people down the path of doing security poorly because it's just too complicated to get right. And so that's our focus here in this demonstration, which is going to be a live demonstration. And our message to you is that it is possible to take an API that doesn't have security on it, to secure that API, publish it out to the marketplace, including documentation with security enabled on it, and then to begin the process right away to start integrating that API with an application that is heterogeneous, that'll work across web browsers that use HTML5, as well as the ability to compile the native binaries for that application, be it an Android APK file or Objective-C that runs on an iPhone. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Max to begin talking about the API.io architecture, which we're very excited about as a browser-based mobile development studio to simplify that process to start building your app right away.
Thanks, Brian. So let me give you a quick overview of the API.io platform. So API.io is a cloud platform for building and running mobile apps. I'm going to start on the left-hand side. So first of all, and it's usually sort of the first question, what kind of apps you can build? So you can build HTML5 mobile apps, and that means the app will run in the browser, on any device, any platform. Now you can also package the app, as Ryan mentioned, for native platforms, iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. And of course, that allows you to push the app to the App Store. Now, in addition to just packaging the app, natively, you can also access device APIs, and that means you can access camera, for example, contact geolocation, and to do the more specific, we use PhoneGap or Apache Cordova. So you actually get full access to the API that PhoneGap provides. So moving into the center, the App Builder section here. So App Builder is one of the core sort of features in the platform, and it provides a visual builder for building the app UI, right? Now, at the same time, you do have access to the source code. So if you need to customize the app, you can actually write any JavaScript, any HTML, and any CSS. So I think the visual approach is very fast and easy, but then having the source allows you to really customize the app. So having both approaches is very important because you get a pretty powerful solution. Also, in the context of the visual app builder, you can create custom components, right? And you can also create page templates. So templates are usually very important, especially for business or enterprise apps, where you have a template and then you can base other pages on that template. Moving to the framework section here, so what's behind the scenes, and as you can see, it's pretty standard stuff. So it's obviously HTML, JavaScript, CSS. We use right now jQuery Mobile for the UI components, although we're working on some other frameworks as well. Apache Cordova or PhoneGap, that would allows you to package the app for the various native platforms and also access device APIs. And there's also an option to run the app in a secure container. Moving to backend services. So as a platform, we provide out-of-the-box integrated backend services. So first, hosting. If you're building a mobile web app, you can host the app with us, with Upgrade.io, but of course you can host the app anywhere else as well. There is a push notification feature. Server code feature allows you to write custom app logic on the server using JavaScript, but of course the key is that you don't have to maintain servers or anything. It's all done in the Upgrade.io cloud. And there's also a database. So it allows you to store app data. So this can be anything, insurance claims, order, purchases. Actually, I'm going to show you an example. We're going to be saving search history into a database today, so you can see it. All right. Now, collaboration and team management. So what we have is kind of a Google Docs model where you can invite other developers to collaborate and work on the app with you at the same time or at different times. So again, it's very, very nice. All right. Now, moving to the right-hand side, Cloud APIs. So the platform makes it very easy and fast to add any third-party APIs. So again, anything available on the internet, and there are some examples here like Salesforce, SendGrid for sending emails, and obviously Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So anything available on the internet and exposed via a REST API, you can easily add to your app. And of course, in this example, we're going to be using SOA REST API services. But yeah, it's as simple. Now moving to the enterprise, and REST Express is a component to Upgrade.io in that if you have any data sources which are not yet exposed via REST APIs, so for instance, there's some examples. There's a database or a web service, LDAP, or in fact any custom data source. So you can use REST Express to expose those data sources via a REST API. And of course, once, as I said, anything is exposed via REST API, you can easily use in your app. All right. The last thing I want to mention is that Upgrade.io is created and backed by XRL, and we're a large enterprise mobile software development company. And we again provide services, technology innovations, and solutions to businesses worldwide. And we've been here in the San Francisco Bay Area in the East Bay since '98, and we're growing and profitable. So again, Upgrade.io is backed and created by XRL. So also just to show you sort of the general, how do you approach building an app in a cloud-based development platform. So what's really interesting is it's obviously very similar to traditional, development tools, but of course this is much faster, easier, and simpler. But the first step is usually you build the app UI. So you drag and drop components, right, buttons, input fields, lists, and so on. You can then very easily add events and actions. So for example, when you click on the button, you would like to navigate to a different page. When you click to a button, you would like to invoke a REST service or invoke some JavaScript, right? Now, next, you connect to REST APIs. So as I said, anything available out there, whether it's SOA, Salesforce, Twitter, Facebook, entirely up to you. Or you can also connect to Upgrade.io backend services, database, push, server code. You test the app, and finally, you can deploy the app for iOS, Android. You can package the app for those platforms, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, or you can also, of course, just publish the app as an HTML5 mobile app. So that's kind of the flow. And again, you'll see these steps when I show you the example.
All right, thanks, Max. So if you could just hand presenter controls back to me. So what we're going to talk about now is the SOA software platform that is actually securing and managing the API that we're going to consume today. And the SOA software platform is available as a platform as a service out in the cloud, hosted in our Terramark facilities, which is a FISMA-compliant cloud service provider. And that's what we're going to demonstrate today is going to be using a community manager portal where the developer, played by Max, is going to log into the portal. He's going to search for the API he wants to consume, request access to that API, test it out in the developer console, and then begin sending test messages to it, requesting an OAuth token from the API gateway, and the API gateway will then proxy and mediate all of the API calls from the client application through the gateway to the target API that we're consuming. And in this case, for the demo today, we will be effectively securing the FAA API to get airport condition status. That API doesn't have any security on it. It's an anonymous allowed API, and we're going to show the process to add OpenID and OAuth security using our API gateway acting as a mediator sitting in front of that API. In an enterprise scenario, you might have the API gateway and the community manager portal on premise behind your firewall, and you might be consuming, instead of a public API like FAA, you might have your own private APIs that only the gateway is allowed to talk to with a secure mutual SSL trust domain. And there's also a scenario where you could have gateways on-premise behind your firewall managed by our policy manager infrastructure that acts as the policy administration point, the policy decision point, and then you could also use our community manager portal to advertise your APIs, provide documentation and a place for developer to go to find it, read those docs, and request access. That could also be managed out in the cloud if you want to do a hybrid integration scenario. SOA Software has been in the business for over a decade. We are a profitable company, privately held, and we do focus on large Fortune 1000 companies and have a lot of empathy for the needs of the enterprise that's integrating across heterogeneous platforms and has regulatory and compliance security requirements that we help them comply with. The value of having an API gateway is many levels. By having an API gateway in front of your API, mediating the requests from the different consumers of that API, be it a mobile application, or it could be another business system at a partner, or it could be a web app, like our community manager portal is a web app portal that actually consumes REST APIs using the CAN.js framework. So every component in that UI is actually a JSON widget that renders a human-readable view of the JSON response coming back from that API. So an API gateway gives you that ability to have multiple consumers with different policies and contracts on them. You might give a mobile app the ability to request 10 transactions per minute, and a partner might get 100 or 1,000 transactions per minute. So you can have different quality of service policies enforced, and also different authentication providers and token schemes for different consumers, all managed by that API gateway, which simplifies your process because now you don't need to make any changes to your API server. You offload that infrastructure responsibility to the gateway, creating a trust domain, which also gives you the ability to mediate, monitor the traffic, which you can use to generate reports on who's consuming the API. And you can do some very advanced things like make multiple calls to different APIs and aggregate those results back into a single response. The gateway will also do some clever things like convert a SOAP service into a REST service for you without you having to port that code, as well as to transform an XML response into a JSON response without you having to write any code. The architecture typically looks like this, where it's a tiered architecture, and we have our App.io developers out on the left-hand side building applications that will consume an API going through the API gateway, which we also call a network director. That network director component is typically a clustered tier. I would typically have it in a DMZ that's mediating those connections from the outside world or a department or a partner to the API that we are securing access to and managing. And that's represented by the circle on the top right-hand side there is the API that we want to manage with the gateway. You'll notice some components there inside the gateway, the ability to issue grants and tokens to consumers of an API that want to authenticate using, instead of basic authentication, they want to migrate away from that and start using token-based authentication. The gateway supports the ability to issue bearer tokens as well as HMAC signed tokens with a nonce on them to make it a little bit more difficult to do a replay attack. Then you'll see on the right-hand side, the policy manager acts as the policy administration point, the policy decision point. That's what the API gateway will talk to ask the question, what is the contract that I need to enforce for this application that's consuming the API right now? So it'll look up the right contract, look up the policies that are attached to that contract. If any policy is violated, we'll reject the request, log an alert. And then the community manager portal there on the right-hand side is the developer-friendly view of the registry of all the APIs that we want to make available to our consumers, and that's where someone will log in, search for an API, and request access to use it. In my demonstration today, I'm going to show our OAuth server integrating with Google and Yahoo OpenID, and I've also got in the Community Manager portal the ability to log on to the portal with a VeriSign Labs identity or a Stack Exchange identity, just demonstrating the seamless integration of the ability to have multiple identity providers be used for authenticating API calls as well as logins to the portal. And another valuable scenario is the ability to integrate the policy manager system and the gateway with your own Active Directory or LDAP or SiteMinder. That ability to have multiple identity providers and different domains linked to different APIs and scenarios is a very powerful concept of trust domains, all managed by this policy manager system that's controlling the portal and the gateway's access. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to Max, and he's going to explain the process to, once we have an API call that we want to make, how to drag and drop those fields onto the canvas that will display the data.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so what you guys are looking at is the visual binding editor, and that's what I said. It's very easy and fast to really consume any APIs available out there, and also bind the API. So on the left-hand side, you see is a response from a REST service, right? And this is the JSON structure, JSON response that this particular service returns. And this is an example of the airport service that we're going to be showing you an example. So this is all the data that is being returned. And then on the right-hand side, this is the page. Right? This is the mobile page. And these are components, right? So again, input fields, labels, buttons, I mean, basically whatever you need in your app UI. And then when you do, you simply map. So you map the response to the page, right? And you do the same thing for input. You can see right now the response is selected, but again, there's also a request tab. So any input that you collect from the page, now in our case, it's going to be airport, the three-letter airport code, will be mapped from the page to the service. So this makes it, I mean, incredibly easy and fast to bind services to the page. Now, to take it a step further, as you can see, there is an Add.js button. So if you need to customize, you can. You can write any JavaScript. So you can do something after the mapping. You can also do something before the mapping. So again, that really allows you to customize the app as much as you want or need.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept. So you've got now a choice to make, because you can run your JavaScript on the API gateway and modify the data before it's even sent back to the client. And then you can also decide that it's okay to run some JavaScript on the client side after the data has made it all the way onto the mobile phone.
Yeah, exactly. And what you guys are seeing now is this is the visual, the builder. So you can see this is the device, and I've got an input field here. I got a button, and I got a list with 4 items here. And then these are the components. So you basically drag and drop the components, and again, you'll see this live in just a few seconds. But you know, this is the visual environment that allows you to really rapidly build the app UI, and you can test the app UI in the browser or actually directly on your phone as well.
Yeah, when I first spoke to Max, I was really excited to see how simple this process was, because I've used a number of other development studios for mobile apps, And I was blown away by the fact that everything that we're doing here, we're doing in a normal web browser. So the fact that this is all a browser-based design studio, it really did impress me, and that's why we put this together.
Now, what you guys are seeing now is basically when you're done, right? So you built the app, what do you do next? So one option is, of course, you can host the app as a mobile web app. So you can host with Upgrade.io. You can also host anywhere else. But you can also, from this screenshot, you can also build a binary for Android, iOS, and Windows Phone, right? And that's basically, the binary app file that you then download and you then upload to the App Store. And with Google, it's going to be a few minutes. With Apple Store, it's going to be a little bit longer, but you'll have your app up there. And so you can see it's a complete process, right? You build the UI, you connect to APIs, you test the app, and then you can build a binary and publish it to the App Store. Another thing that is not shown here is that how do you test a native app, right? If you use, for example, native APIs like the camera, for example, or the barcode scanner. One option is, of course, you can install the app on the phone, but installing it every time is kind of a pain, right? You don't want to install it every time you make a change. So we provide a special tester app that you can easily launch the native app from that app, right? So you don't have to reinstall with each update. So again, it's a special tester app that we make available. It's called the Upgrade.io Mobile Tester, and that really allows you to easily test native apps and native APIs. And there's a link we're going to show you a little bit where you'll be able to find the app and also all the developer resources.
All right, so I think now we're ready to get into our demo, and I am advertising here a couple URLs if you're interested in actually connecting to the site, if you're following along after this has been recorded and you're pausing it and trying to build this on your own. And those URLs there you can go to and register for access, to use the developer portal to request access to the API we're using today. And there's also a link to documentation there at docs.soa.com for a lot of additional information on how this process works. Effectively, the first thing that Max is going to do after I make a new version of an API, which I'm about to do in my demo, is he's going to request access to use that API here. So you see that request access flow that the developer will experience when a new version of an API is published and someone wants to begin using it for the first time. So without further ado, I'll start the demonstration. All right, so you see here I'm going to the Community Manager portal that is effectively the registry of the APIs that we are exposing to build our mobile apps with. And you can have multiple of these portals. If you're building your own environment on-premise in an enterprise environment, then think of these portals. You might have one portal per department, and each department gets their own view and maybe only a subset of the APIs, and maybe some APIs are shared across departments. So that's how these portals are typically used, is to organize your APIs and then to also track who has access to use those APIs. So I'm going to effectively click login here to use the portal. If you haven't registered yet and you want to register to use this, you can either create an account or you could use our OpenID logins here, and you can log in with one of your existing identities, like a Google OpenID identity or Yahoo identity or a Symantec or a Stack Exchange identity. And we support any OpenID provider. These are just a few examples of ones that I've already integrated with the site. And so I'm going to log in as an administrator. And I'm going to start by building a new version of the FAA API, and I'm going to change it. Currently, the FAA API is configured to do OpenID authentication using Yahoo, and so we're going to notify the users of this on the board that we are deprecating the Yahoo OpenID access, and we are changing it to log in with Google. I'm also going to add a new operation to the API to handle a situation where someone requests an airport code that the FAA doesn't manage. And the example I'm going to use is the Toronto airport code, which isn't in the jurisdiction of the FAA. And so if you ask for that, you actually will just get a 404 back. And so their API doesn't handle the situation where the object requested isn't in their database. So we get the notice here. So Max should be getting an email and a notice on his dashboard that this change is about to be made. And to show you what I mean, I'm just going to continue to use version 5 right now so you get a feel for how version 5 of this API works. And then you'll see how it changes when we create version 6. So currently when I go into my developer console that's linked to my application that I'm building here, we've got a security button on the right-hand side that pre-populates my application ID and my secret that identifies this application to the API Gateway, so the API Gateway knows what contract and policy to enforce. And currently you see when I hit Get Token, it's actually going to prompt me to log in with Yahoo, because I currently have my OAuth domain linked to the Yahoo OpenID provider. And so then I'll authenticate with Yahoo. Yahoo will send an acknowledgement back to our OAuth server that I did type in my correct password, and now we get the SOA OAuth server authorization grant screen, and this has actually been extended to prompt the user to type in an account number. Now this doesn't stop the token from being generated if it's an invalid account number, but it is indeed passed as a header to the target API so that the target API can use that data to determine how to respond to the request. So this is an example of multi-factor authentication. The first factor being my Yahoo identity, the second factor being my account number, which might be used by the downstream API. And now I'll click Authorize the Grant, which is only giving me access to public scopes. And I'll talk about scopes a little bit later. That gives you the ability to control which operations on an API user is allowed to access. In other words, if we had operations that were classified as a private scope, the token I'm about to get right now when I click on Authorize wouldn't work on those operations, and the gateway would give the user an access denied. So we see here I now have an access token that's got a limited scope. It's now a public scope. And I simply put in my airport code and click on Run It. You'll see that the gateway generates an authorization header with that access code, the bearer token in it, protecting my identity. So you don't see my Yahoo identity in this request. So that's another value of the three-legged authorization code process, is that the user types their password directly to the identity provider. It doesn't go through the gateway, so the gateway isn't able to log that identity and password, and after they get their token, those credentials are not being sent in every request, which makes it very difficult to intercept a password or crack a password like the way basic authentication works. So that was a well-formed request. You see here my URL says, give me the status of the LAX airport, and I get a response back. It's a 200, and I get my data in JSON format. Currently, the airport conditions at LAX are partly cloudy, and if we just change this to SFO, we'll see that I get now data from a different airport. So that's currently the way version 5 of this works. And then the scenario I was talking about where you have an invalid airport code, like YYZ, you'll see here what comes back from the FAA's API is a 404. So the application will not be able to even render any of this because it's not coming back as JSON at all. It's coming back as an HTML web page. So we're going to show how to handle this situation by making a new version of the API. So we're making a couple changes. First, I'm going to change OAuth. So I'm going to go into my domains, I'm going to modify my OAuth provider, and I'm going to select now a different domain to authenticate with. I'm going to change it from the Yahoo domain to Google. And then you'll see here on the properties page, I'm now going to also remove it so we don't need to collect that account number anymore, just to show you how I created that extensible property to collect that data. And so now by removing that grant property, it won't prompt for the account number the next time we authenticate. The last step in setting up OAuth is you brand the pop-up screen that prompts for that authorization grant. And I did skip over scopes, so I'll just talk about that. This is where I define the scopes linked to these OAuth tokens we issued. You can make up any scopes you want and then map them to your API operations. So that's as simple as it is there to make a change to your OAuth domain. If you want to shorten or extend the lifespan of these tokens, you can adjust the timeouts there. And you can make your grant live for longer than a day so people don't have to authorize every day. If you want to make the 1-year-long grant, go ahead and do that. I'll just change it to a 30-day grant. So now OAuth is set up. I'll just save this. And then we'll go and we'll make a new version of the API. So I'll go to my APIs. You see here I now have version 5 that I'm working on. And I'm going to add a version. So we're creating version 6. Just making a note on what I'm changing. You see here this is using licenses. We'll talk about licenses in a minute. The target URL is services.faa.gov. That's what our gateway is going to integrate with. I'm going to add a new operation to catch that unknown airport code. And the way this works is I just make up the URL that will be asked for. And so when we see that come into the gateway will treat it differently than it does for a valid airport code, which is classified in braces there as a variable. And change my URL to be version 6, so we now have a new URL. And you'll see here that I've got a couple of policies being attached to this. It's not allowing anonymous access, and it is indeed doing detailed auditing, logging all the data that's going through the gateway so we can generate reports and do debugging. And you see here I've also got the OAuth security policy, and I have an alerting policy on there that when things get slower than 500 milliseconds, someone gets a notice, they get an alert, and that's either email or an SNMP trap that can go to your management console. And so now I've just created a new version of this API, and I'll save it. And now I have to define what happens when we hit that YYZ airport code. So I have to configure something, but before I do that, I'm first going to then configure version 6 to use the correct OAuth server. So I'll link it to this OAuth domain that we created. And then I'll just make both of these public scopes. And this is where I was talking about if you wanted to make one of your operations a private scope, you would simply do that mapping here at this point. And now we'll configure licenses the same way. So this tells the gateway what license to apply, and it's linked to scopes as well. And if we want to look at that license, you'll see here that the license here for public scopes is my sandbox license. And so when I look at this license, you'll see it's got some terms on it. And the terms on the sandbox license are that it is limited to public scopes only, and it also puts an SLA limiting the throughput to 10 transactions per minute. I don't need to make any changes there. So now let's go into the policy manager and configure what happens on the YYZ airport code. Policy manager is your policy administration point. This is where this is the power tool that the gateway integrates with. So I'll go into my tenant here that I'm working with. This is my demo environment, which I call poster, because it does a lot of getting and posting. And so you see here I now have a new version 6 physical service, which points to the real FAA endpoint. That's the physical. And then the virtual service is what runs on the gateway. And you'll see the gateway there is what's running out in our cloud on SOA.com. I'm going into the operation that I created, the new operation YYZ, and I'm going to define a new process. I actually don't want it to invoke the downstream API. Currently, it thinks that's a real airport code. It thinks it's a real operation that the API knows about. And this is the tool to invoke any API in the system. So right now, it is configured to talk to that real FAA endpoint, but I'm going to change it. I don't want to do that because, we saw that it gives us a 404 when we asked for that airport code. So I'm going to delete the invoke. And instead of doing an invoke, I'm going to send a static response. I wanted to send back JSON. And let's just get a template with a real response in it that I can paste in there. And I'll just do that by getting another request and copying it in. Oops. So now someone that calls that thinks that they're actually talking to the SOA API, because what I'm doing here is I'm pasting in a response that looks like it's actually coming back from the real API endpoint, but it's not. It's actually coming from the gateway. And we'll say that the reason here is because Toronto is not managed by the SAA. I like to have fun when I do my demos, so I'll make it mostly Canadian. All right, so just a little bit there on, how to make a static response that looks like it's coming back from a real service. And then I'll just save this process. And now the gateway has been configured with a new airport code. And now let's just verify that it works the way I want it to work before I notify a developer that this is ready. And so I'll do that by going and finding the API and linking it to my test application that I'm building. Request my license, read and accept the terms and conditions, save it, go back into my developer console, find version 6, get my token, authorize the grant, didn't have to type in an account number, everything's working beautifully, try JFK, all right, that works. Now let's see if I get a 404. Well, no, I don't. I get my 200 this time, and there is the custom response. So we now fixed a scenario where we had bad data. So now I'm going to hand it over to Max, and I'm just going to notify Max that I have a new version that's ready to use. So we'll do that by, again, going back to our API, go to version 5, go to the board, send an alert to everyone that knows about this. And that's a typical day in the life of an API administrator that's working on building a new API. Okay. So Max, it's all yours.
Thanks, Ryan. That was really good. All right. All right. So I'm logged in as a developer, and so right here I have the FAA status right here. And as you can see, this is the new version that Ryan created, version 6, and now I'm going to say access. All right, I'm going to say add, and then next. So sandbox environment, next, and then accept the license, which is shown here, and then click accept. Right, and then save. All right, so you can see right here, so again, so this is from the developer's sort of perspective. I got an email that, something was changed, and, I accepted, and so I've got a new version of the API. All right, so now I can also test it, so I can go right here. Actually, let me go to my apps. And so this is my app. And I can go to Dev Console and select the new version, and then click Security and get the token. And this is, of course, just making sure that everything works. And I'm going to click Authorize. All right. And now I can enter an airport. And here we go. We get the results. So this is very nice because, again, you can test the API even before trying to use it in an app. And again, so this is very nice. All right, but now, so how do you take this? Once you test it, everything works, everything is good. How do you take it from here and actually building a mobile app? So I'm going to switch to the Upgrade.io platform, and so this is sort of the the start page or the dashboard. And right here at the top, you see sort of the main components of the platform. So you got apps, so that's the UI. You got database, server code. Secure REST allows you to keep sensitive app data, such as API keys, on the server. And plugins, these are out-of-the-box connectors to various API providers. So you can sort of import a plugin, for example, a Salesforce plugin, and it will be connected to Salesforce instantly. But what I have here, I have an existing app that I'm going to go ahead and open. And as I mentioned, this is running entirely in the cloud. So what I'm loading the development, the app builder right now, right? And so this is how it looks. So I've got two pages right now. I've got a login page, right? And I also got airport status page, right? So before I actually explain, so let me just quickly run the app. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the API version. So I'm going to go to airport status, and you can see right here it says version 5. That's the old version. It's not working anymore. I'm going to change it to version 6. Right? I'm going to click Save, and right here in the upper right corner there is a test button, which allows me to actually test the app right in the browser.
Could we actually show the OAuth settings as well?
I will. Just making sure that the app works, and then we're going to switch back to the platform, and we're going to go over all the settings. So sign in with Google. All right, and you guys, so this is a similar screen you saw before. So this is I'm authorizing the app to access the API, authorize. All right, and now I'm back. So I'm going to enter an airport code. So for example, LAX. Click Show Status, and so right now I'm displaying just the name of the airport and also the if there's a delay. So there is no delay. So there's no known delays for this airport. So let me go back to the platform, just kind of go over the app, and then we're going to make some changes to the app. We're going to add more information to display, and specifically we're going to get weather, so we can display the weather for the airport as well. All right. So this is the sign-in screen, right, or page, and the button. Now, how do you add events? Right, when you click a button, something happens. Well, it's very simple. There's an Events tab, and you can see there's a click event and run JavaScript, right? So again, run JavaScript allows you to write anything you want. Now, in my particular case, I am running, just invoking a function which sort of starts the OAuth, process, the OAuth dance. And the function is defined right here in SOA helper. And again, you can see JavaScript, and again, you can have as many JavaScript files as you need, all right? So this is the code right here that makes a request to log in with Google. So, I am, there are some settings that I'm creating a URL here, right? This is the login URL, and then there's the client ID, there's the callback URL, right? And these are saved in SOA settings. right? So this is just a settings file with key values. So I got the client ID, I got the callback URL, and I got a login URL, right? And so why do I keep the login URL here? Now, in case it changes, right, and I have multiple services, for instance, I can just go here and change it in one place, right? And I don't have to go everywhere in the code and make the change. Now,
and then same thing, if you go back here into the portal and you create a new version of your application and you get a different application ID, which is what you see here, that application ID you would also change in your client app, because that application ID is what our gateway uses to identify the consumer.
Exactly, exactly. And so I switch back to the portal here, and you can see this is the callback URL right here. Right, so this is the same callback URL that I have in my app right here. All right. So this is for the settings file. So again, when this button is clicked, and we can do this again. Click test, and so you can see we're taking to this URL, and then you authorize. So when you authorize, right? So I already signed into Google. That's why I didn't have to log in. But you would usually see a login screen with your email and password. So when I click authorize, and you can see this is the callback page, and then there is a code, right? So when the server redirects back to this page, I'm actually reading this code, and this is done via this very simple helper as well. It's done right here, right? Basically, I read the code from the URL, and I save it into local storage, right? So again, you always start with a mobile web app, and that means you have access to local storage API, and in fact, you have access to all the browser APIs.
Yeah, if we could just go back to the other screen for a moment just so we can explain this code. The way OAuth works is before you can ask for a token, you first have to do a GET request to get an authorization code, which is a single-use only number. Show them that number again on the end of the URL. So to see that number there at the end of the URL, code equals, that's what the OAuth server comes back with after you say get an authorization code. The authorization code is not a token. It's only a limited use only value that allows you to ask for a token for a short window of time. And this is the value of a three-legged OAuth solution, is it makes it very difficult for someone to even ask for tokens if we don't know who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so when we're back, we're back at this page, at the airport page, right? So a couple of things happen here. And again, what happens, I'm going to open events. And so first of all, right here, you can see this code. And this is just, you can ignore this. This was commented. But right here, right, the token is saved. This is calling the helper function. The token is saved into local storage. Now, what happens next is we actually call a service, and we actually get the authorization, the OAuth token here, right? And the service, now let me cancel, the service is right here. So we make a request, and there's some information that we pass, including the code that we just read from the URL. And now in the response, we basically, which is then again saved into local storage so we can use it on other pages. And airport, I'm going to go to data, and I'm going to open mapping. All right, so actually this is the wrong one. We want to go to token here. So again, this is the request, and you can see the code that I read from the URL is saved into local storage and then mapped to the service, to the request. Now, on the response, what happens is the access token that I get from the server is then again saved into local storage, and then I can use this access token on different pages. Now, if I go back to the list of data sources, you can see airport status, and I'm going to open it and request. You can see the access token that was previously saved is now mapped to the authorization, and that's a header parameter, right? And you can see if I click edit.js, we can actually, it's a super simple JavaScript, but we have to add the words there plus the value, right? And On the response, what happens is that, so you guys saw this screenshot at the beginning, but we basically, this is the data that we get back from the service, and then we take the name, for example, map it to the name field on the page, and then we have the delay, the reason, right, that's actual reason, and we map it, right? So let me quickly run this again, and then I'm going to make some changes to the app. So let's log in with Google and authorize. All right, and it's a SFO. All right, so again, San Francisco, and then no delay. So again, let's say I want to display the weather information as well. So how do we do that? We go to design, and using the visual app builder, I'm going to take a list component and just going to drag and drop it, just as simple as that. Now I'm going to make some changes to the list. Well, first of all, I'm going to name it weather. Right. And now I'm going to, I don't need icons, so I'm going to select no icon. And then this is, I'm going to make this to be the divider, and this is going to be weather. All right. Now, what's really nice, again, is when you build the app, you can test. Once you build the UI, you can, right? Not actually visible. Let me select the entire list. The service was invoked. So I go to test. All right. Oh, what happened here? Let's give this another try. All right. Authorize, and let's enter Boston. Where you can see, so you can see the section is now here. And so you can kind of see, hey, this looks nice, and so on. Now, of course, we don't display any data yet because we haven't done the mapping. So let's do the mapping for the weather section. So go back. Again, this is the design view. I'm going to switch to data view, and this is, again, where you add data sources. And this is the list of my data sources, right? The first one is to get the token, then the actual invoking the status service. I'm going to click Edit Mapping. And right here is the weather list. So I'm going to take right here, for example, weather, map it to the second item, and then temperature, I'm going to map it, let me just collapse it like this, temperature, map it to the other item. So you can see how, incredibly easy this is to map data, all right? And all I need to do now is click Test again. All right. Okay. So you can see now weather is partly cloudy, and it's about 81 degrees in JFK. And let's say we do just one more example with Miami International Airport. So you can see that actually no delays anywhere. It looks like it. It's a good day to fly. So you can see. All right. Now, I know we're just a few minutes left. What I'm going to do really quickly is that what's really also nice, you can make this app public, right? And you can try this app actually. The only thing is you will need to have your Google login information, to log in. But you can actually try this app in the browser, desktop browser, or also on your phone. So really fast, what I'm going to do is make this. It's already public. I'm going to take this link, and I'm going to. Let me see if I can chat.
And you could also use your camera and photograph the QR code as it'll open on your mobile device.
Yeah, I'm going to put this into the chat for everyone. Let me just see here. All attendees. All right, so you can click on the link that I sent, or you can scan this QR code. If you have a QR reader app on your device, just scan this QR code, and you will be able to launch. So there's one more thing I wanted to show. Unfortunately, looks like we're out of time. Is that every time you run a search, You can also easily save the search into a cloud database that comes integrated with API.io, right? And then you can go to a different page and view a history of all the searches, right? But I think we're out of time. So
that was great, Max.
This is from SOA Software. I think if people would like to stay on a little later, if the presenters can answer questions now, that would be great. Otherwise, perhaps, would you be willing to answer these questions in email, potentially?
We can stay longer, and let's just, Max, send it back to me. I want to wrap up with a few slides while we figure out what questions we're going to take.
Sure. Let me just stop sharing. All right, should be.
All right, so we saw the demo. Here's a couple of links there for you to know about, to go to the APRI website, to read their documentation, to request an account. So just take a screenshot of that so you have those URLs. Again, SOA Software is a leader in this space. Gartner has us in the top right-hand side as visionary leaders that are able to execute against the competition in this space of API management, application services governance. And again, just a little bit of a reminder what an API gateway can do for you. The product ships with a number of policy templates that can manage these services for you, be it from authentication authorization to quality of service policies, and again, detecting and preventing malicious attacks like denial of service attacks, malicious code injection attacks, SQL injections, etc. And so now we'll just answer a few questions here that have come through. So Hugh, what do we have first?
If we go down to if you go to the Q&A panel, we'll go from the earliest ones. We have, do the cloud APIs have SharePoint on-premises or Office 365? That's a question.
That is not applicable.
Okay.
I'm guessing it might be a question. I guess I'm just for APRI.io. I guess it's a cloud API that I showed in the diagram. If you have SharePoint, yeah, you can definitely connect to it via REST APIs. And again, anything exposed via REST, anything really, you can easily connect to from your app.
Also, can you go back to the slide with the URLs that people would like to copy them down? So one person says, we have significant constraints related to test data and PHI. We cannot have PHI in a shared or public cloud. Can you speak to how this can be supported?
Absolutely. So PHI is protected health information, which is governed and controlled by the HIPAA regulation and the Privacy Acts. And we certainly can support this. If you did use the cloud, rest assured we are in a FISMA compliant PCI certified cloud environment. However, like I said, you can install all the software from SOA and APRI on-premise in your own dedicated controlled environment, so you don't have to use the cloud at all.
Great. Does the API Gateway do data transformation, JSON to XML, REST to SOAP, bytes to string, XML to Java, etc., which you normally find in an ESB?
It's very much like an ESB. It's a stateless system. It does transformation from XML to JSON. There's really no way to do XML to Java. That's orthogonal. But the REST to SOAP protocols are also transformable, and the gateway can even bridge to an asynchronous system like JMS.
Okay. Is APRI iOS compatible or just for Java devices?
So APRI.io is it's a development tool for building iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and HTML5 mobile apps. So, compatible, I guess maybe it's not sort of the right question, but again, you can build apps which you can then publish to the App Store, again, for iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and also HTML5, which means, again, those will run from any device as long as they have a modern browser.
So a question, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding this, but it says, can the authorized step be completely bypassed and done behind the scenes to make the app work faster?
Yeah, you can, and authorized grant is a feature of the OAuth system. You don't have to use OAuth. You could use any other security mechanism. You could even use a shared secret if you wanted to, or an X509 certificate. And you can also set it up so that the grant lives for, like I said, a longer period of time, so that that authorized step only has to happen once, maybe per month or per year.
Okay. Does this work for
one thing? Sorry, there was another question?
The person wants to know if this works for bring your own device or BYOD environments.
Yes.
Yeah, any mobile device. Any mobile device, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, what I'm hearing in that question is with AppRe, could you make like different editions of an app, like for, you know, iOS and Android for the same organization or that kind of thing?
Well, so AppRe is again, it's a platform to build cross-platform mobile apps. So you actually, you know, even though you could build a separate app for iOS, Android, and so on, I mean, the really, you know, one of the sort of values is that you can build one app and then, you know, target different platforms. So again, the app that I built, you can, again, you guys saw it, hopefully you guys tried the link, so that's the mobile web. I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but you saw a screenshot. We can build a binary for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, and I guess I can quickly share my screen with you. So yeah, it's a cross-platform, it's single code based, and you can target multiple platforms. Now before I just quickly show the link that you guys see now, bit.ly, SOA.io, it's actually a link to register to sign up with, and there is a promo code. So if you, when you sign up for our free.io plan, definitely use this link because it's going to give you, you know, you'll be able to create more apps using the promo code. So definitely use that. But if I quickly share my screen, so right here, I'm back to, you know, export. So this is where you can build a binary for, again, for example, for Android, I can click, and it's going to be a minute or so, but basically you're going to build a binary file that you can install right away on your Android phone. And then you're 5 minutes away from publishing it to Google Play. So again, it's going to be a minute or so, but it will.
Okay. Well, okay, so that's all the questions we have. Just one final thing that just as this event has been recorded. We will be circulating a link to a recording. It takes a couple days for us to put it together. On the same email that we do to follow up, there'll be a link to download the slides from SlideShare. If you have questions to follow up, you can send them. The simplest thing is to send them to marketing@soa.com, and we will forward them to the presenters. Thank you so much for being with us today. Do you have any other final comments, Ryan or Max? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
Thank you all for attending. I appreciate your attention and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.